Thank you, Hamad. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all my friends, fellow members, representatives from ACCA's employer community and other very close contacts of ACCA here this morning. So we had an opportunity to listen to Roshana Zafar, MD of Gushov, talk about her sort of techniques, if you like, in leading Gushov, and she was mainly talking about her value-adding approach to leadership. So the report that we're concentrating on is called CFOs and the C-Suite, Leadership Fit for the 21st Century. Now the report talks about three headwinds that leaders and finance communities are facing. And you may agree with those headwinds. You may, living here in Pakistan, have your own sort of challenges and headwinds to face. Now they are the headwinds. Let me remind the panel and everybody in the audience, it's worth mentioning them. So the three headwinds that the report sort of classifies, one is macroeconomic. So I think Roshana touched upon this, that we live in a very globalized world. There's a lot of complexity, a lot of uncertainty. The acronym being used in the report is called the VUCA world, so which is a term used originally by the American military, and it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So it's a punchy sort of acronym to describe the volatility of the world we live in. So that's one of the headwinds that we're facing. The other headwind is, it's not surprising, it's the speed at which we as individuals and business models are facing the rapidly changing technological advances. So as the digital age is hitting us, and it has been for several years, how are leaders responding to that challenging headwind that they're facing? And the last one, which maybe for those of us living in Pakistan seems, somewhat of a long-term, a very long-term agenda, is the headwind, which is really around climate change, which is demanding organizations really to behave in a manner that they are responsible corporate citizens. So that's another headwind. So my first question to the panel is, whether you in your roles, especially the majority of you working in Pakistan, leading in Pakistan, whether you agree with that sort of definition of the headwinds that leaderships are facing, or whether you see other headwinds that's hitting you as well. So first, let me start off with Helen, because you travel across the world. You're based in London, and it's a multicultural city. You interact with a lot of overseas staff and a lot of overseas stakeholders. So do you agree with that overall definition of the VUCA world that leaders are facing?
Yes, I think I do. Certainly in the aspects of complexity and ambiguity, I don't think there's any question that you can always now be providing the answer to every issue that either as a business or an individual that you face. On the final challenge around climate change, I think that's a broader issue in terms of societal challenge to businesses. So it is about showing that value that you're creating broadly in the interests of the societies, communities and economies where you work. And I think that is an increasing pressure on leadership and increasing pressure on business. And the environment is one element of that, but it's not the only element. And I think social change, political change, all those elements are impacting more directly on businesses than they ever were before. And if you don't have the leadership story that relates to that environment, it's very difficult to drive sustainable success for your organisation.
John, would you like to also comment on?
Can
you hear me? Hi. So, Mr. John said, the VUCA world, which I described, and here living in Pakistan and the complexities that we're faced with here, would you agree that leaders are faced with these global challenges, or would you like to add other more national sort of headwinds that you're faced with?
I think on the whole, of course, there is no doubt that the macroeconomic changes that you spoke about are there. What I would add to your comments is that perhaps these changes are not new, but the degree of volatility has increased over the last decade, if you will. Pace of change, of course, is something that is very different from what it was even when I started my career. But going forward, I can see that something like this will happen, will continue to grow exponentially. So one has to be more on the ball and more able to deal with things that are being seen, or problems or issues that are being seen for the first time ever in your organization or in your own experience. So those are the two things that I would like to add to this conversation.
Misbah?
I couldn't agree more, actually. Especially looking at from a multinational perspective as well. Of course, these things are very relevant, but also when you are working in local markets, these impacts, you would be surprised how quickly they are reflected in the marketplace. And so the world is now, you're connected with the world, everything is connected. So it can't be that you have a very local or regionalized challenge. Immediately you have to face these. If there is a slowdown everywhere, eventually it is finding its way to our economy as well. So yeah, I completely agree. Absolutely.
And Fatma, in terms of the VUCA world that I've described, and trying to contextualize it for our local audience, and would you agree that even leaders in Pakistan are facing these three headwinds, or are there different challenges of this?
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I would say that Pakistan is very familiar with the VUCA world because every day throws a new challenge to our business leaders, even the people of Pakistan. Even if you look at the history, 70-year history of our country, there has been extreme volatility, whether it is from a political perspective or social transformation perspective, and other challenges that we continue to face as a nation, and we continue to be very resilient. And so this particular term, in my opinion, is not something which is new to our country. And we rise above that, no doubt about it. But I agree with my panelists in saying that it is the speed with which the changes are coming in, which we have to have the resolve and the determination and the foresight to deal with. And I think that's where the main challenge is. Some of the elements that were covered in the report and the survey that you shared with us talked about the skills that are required. So I think the major shift is predominantly driven by technology. Over the last 20 to 30 years, the advent of technology and how it has impacted how we live our lives, whether it is at an individual level or whether it is at the business level, the way we need to take decisions on our feet as soon as information is thrown at us, to sift through that information, to make sense of it and make good business decisions is one of the challenges. And with that, the behaviors and the competencies that are required also have shifted to being more critically analyzing certain aspects and then taking real-time decisions. So in that particular aspect, while we continue to deal with the challenges of the VUCA world, we need to also recognize that a big significant component and factor is the technology that is impacting, and it is not only about leveraging that technology and ensuring that our people within our organization have the ability and aptitude to deal with it, but also are we managing the technology strategically to enable sustainability and good performance or high performance within our organization.
Thank you, Fatma. So Rizwan, you're from the IT world within telecom, so there's a lot of competitiveness in that world. Would you agree also with the VUCA definition and in terms of how you view that within Pakistan in the context of the world that you operate in? Do you agree that the VUCA world is certainly one challenge that you're faced with?
I think Fatma has articulated it very well that challenges aren't new. Our realization and appreciation of them level that has increased. We've become more aware of the potential impact and the day-to-day impact that it has on our business. The challenge is not new to Pakistan either. I was going through the report which the ACCA had shared. It had global examples. Okay. It made me think that how many of those are relevant. There was no example for Pakistan in that. All of those examples are relevant in mind. Okay. Their scale and their impact on our businesses have local impacts. Okay. I do agree that the skills which are required from a leader at a principal level haven't changed. Okay. We still expect the leaders to have be ethical, have great values. Okay. They have long shadows. Okay. They need to set examples. Okay. In my personal opinion, the one skill which is mandated in today's day and age to deal with the volatility, uncertainty and complexity of the business is that a greater degree of agility is required. Okay. We have the reaction time that is afforded to us to process the information, to react to a situation has been shortened. Okay. That is related to how interconnected our businesses are. And these principles are very much applicable in the economic setup in which we operate in Pakistan. We face the same challenges. Okay. So hence the articulation that we hear from the panelists is very relevant. What we read in your report is very relevant.
One of the areas that I wanted to pick up, especially in terms of the solutions recommended by the report to respond, for leaders to respond to the VUCA world, was what they call the collaboration enterprise.
Yeah.
So collaboration between, membership of maybe the C-suite or the management board or the leadership team, the executive team. So and how well they work together may be a distinguishing factor. But then they also talk about collaboration beyond the executive team or the management board as well. So I just want to pick up on that in each of you, because I think we hear a lot of the expression networking. So leaders are great at networking internally, and they're also great at networking externally. So let's pick up on that. Let's tease out a few points on networking collaboration. So John said, in your organization, how do you adopt a style of, if you like, networking, and how do you achieve, and what is that? Can you share for the audience, what is networking internally, and how does one benefit from that?
Well, like you mentioned, the collaboration and networking is on several planes. It is external, outside the organization, and that can be with people connected with you, for example, vendors or suppliers, or it can be customers, and then it is. So there is collaboration externally, and that's very useful and a very important part of any leadership team's responsibilities. Since you asked me specifically about internal collaboration, I can talk about that in a little more detail. Internal collaboration, of course, is very important, and the way I see it, every executive member or C-suite member of a company has two very distinct responsibilities. One can debate the percentages or the proportions, but I feel roughly a third of everybody's responsibility is in running or forwarding the enterprise towards its objectives. and the 2/3 input comes as a specialist, whether they are an accountant or operations person or a supply chain specialist or a sales or marketing person. So on the 1/3 part of your responsibilities, it is pure collaboration, because you're not an expert, yet you are expected to be able to comment on a sales strategy or a marketing strategy or an operation strategy. And that can only come effectively through networking. If people in the C-suite want, within months and years, a couple of years at the most, if they sit with their colleagues who are on sales or marketing or supply chain, they will start understanding the language, they will start understanding the philosophy, they will start understanding how that particular function works, and they will genuinely give good contribution as to how to take that forward, and they can be a good sounding board for the specialists in that part of the organization. So I can't imagine an organization in this day and age to work well without the collaboration.
Misbah, Tetra Pak, huge global organization. You know, you've got your members of your own team spread in, you were telling me, 5 different countries. How would you define, you know, what is good networking or collaboration internally, and you know, how do you personally achieve it, and what benefits does it have for yourself?
I think it's a very critical point, also because, you know, we are always talking about external networking, sales, marketing, right? I mean, our focus is outside the organization, and we keep on underestimating the value of internal networks. And I can tell you, for a company, a global company like Tetra Pak and other companies, you have subject matter experts spread all over the world. And you also have your senior and top management. Now, there is an opportunity that comes in, which you know will benefit your customer and, you know, is overall a good proposal. If you lack internal networks, it's not going to happen. Even if it happens, the pace of it is going to be so slow that you might even miss the opportunity by the time you have convinced enough people to get that strategic decision in. So, you know, it's not just a buzzword. I think it's part of your job to maintain and establish networks, even internally, not just external. External is of course survival, but if you don't have good networks, and if you don't know where the knowledge is sitting, or if you don't know the people who are going to make the decisions, or the challenges they face, or the way they are looking at things, you are not going to be very successful locally as well. So, you know, in the marketplace, because you don't have any leverage built within your organization by yourself.
Fatma, you wanted to say something?
So collaboration and internal support is very close to the first point about sense of purpose as well. And it works hand in hand, and having an integrated approach is not just about ensuring that all the building blocks within your organization are working seamlessly in order to achieve the objective of your organization, but it also talks about, at the C level, are leaders talking horizontally, communicating effectively towards that shared vision to brand the organization rather than their departments or their functions or their divisions. And that's an extremely important element, because too often when an organization grows very rapidly, you have the silo effect that comes in. And when you have silos working within the organization, that particular division may be working very efficiently, achieving their targets, etc. But it is not really adding value at the level it should at the organization level. So within, if I give an example, and one of the things that you had indicated was, let's have some examples from our own organizations. Now, Abacus Consulting has grown phenomenally over the last at least 12 years, but in its 30-year history, it's gone through a fundamental transformation since it opened its doors. Right now, our challenge is to grow rapidly in an international market. So we have presence across 3 continents right now, But our challenge is that these 12 businesses and the business areas and what we call the practice area leaders work with each other to ensure that Abacus grows on a sustainable basis. So fundamentally, you have the COOs who are running their own set of businesses in terms of the dynamics, whether it's technology or whether it's supply chain or it's HR or corporate finance. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're looking at a collaborative model at the C level where we're saying this is the objective and the vision of Abacus. Are we doing enough to ensure sustainability, high growth and good performance through our people? So that is communicated both horizontally and vertically to all their organization, and these key leaders will define the future, the next 30 years of Abacus as well. So that transformative model has to be honed into that sense of purpose, plus a collaboration which takes place through our people, who are our greatest asset, quite frankly speaking, at the end of the day. And then you have collaboration with your external, whether it's your vendors and of course our clients, who are our greatest, that's where we're contributing.
Yeah, I was going to touch upon the external networking element as well. Helen, ACCA, I've been there for almost 20 years, and in the last sort of decade, it's really pushed that collaborative effort throughout the organization, and it really relies upon a culture of sharing collaboration. Could you share more on that?
Sure. I think just to start off with, I agree with I think when people have been talking about networking, it's been to individual benefits, and that's probably the mindset around networking. And now it's a much deeper and broader and corporate activity that we have to see it that way and talk about it that way. In terms of collaboration, I think it's really essential that collaboration is embedded in an organisation if you want to innovate. So having an open mind, bringing people together who have the emotional intelligence and the awareness to collaborate effectively, to have new ideas, to respond to that VUCA world around us, and deliver new products, new ways of working, new processes. That doesn't always come from the executive team or from the board. That has to come from every level in the organisation. And within ACCA, what I've talked about very frequently is leadership at all levels. But you have to create the environment in which that leadership can flourish. So it doesn't matter, I run within ACCA Chief Executives Awards every year, where we're looking for people who have shown that innovation through collaborating with others and done something different. And that very often comes from the frontline customer team. In fact, it can come from the finance department, it can come from marketing, it can come from anywhere in the organisation at any level, and demonstrates to people that they can make a huge difference to the way they work with others and the way in which they collaborate. I believe it's the only way that an organisation like ACCA can succeed, because then you are extracting the best from everybody, valuing individuals from doing things differently, from challenging the status quo, and from focusing on those overall goals of the organisation.
Your views on the collaborative model of leadership, but also, can you also touch upon how you're using collaboration in your sector externally as well? Because I think we talked about internal, but if you could talk about your own internal experiences of ensuring the sharing a collaborative culture, but also externally as well. How do leaders drive that here in Pakistan?
Fair enough, thank you. Collaboration in a small business is very straightforward. It's easier to achieve. And as some of the panelists here were commenting, that when you achieve certain scale, it is that time where you need a collaborative process to align the thought process of the organization, gear it better to deliver the services or achieve the purpose that it had been set up. And it is that point, or it is at that scale where the leadership is required to register the importance of the collaboration within the organization and the market for example, the market in which we operate here in Pakistan, we are part of a service industry. We collaborate with our competition at times for delivery of services to our customers, because it is simply not possible for us, the scale at which we are, and for the companies which are at our scale, to do it all themselves. So we have to collaborate. Collaboration traditionally has been looked into, okay, collaborating with the partners that you have, who are either your suppliers or vendors or your customers in terms of how you engage with them. But today there is a need to engage the competition as well, okay, because the businesses at the end of the day are there to deliver certain shareholder wealth. That has to come from good financial results. In the volatile, uncertain, complex environment in which we operate, there is a significant pressure on the costs we incur, and we have to come up with models in which we can even work with competition to optimize the solutions that we take to market. So we have reached out to our competition, and we have collaborated with them, and they've appreciated the need to do so, and we have been very successful in specific areas to do that.
Thank you, Rizwan. Yes.
I would just make a point, and it's interesting when you talk about competition and you talked about innovation. I mean, I think we also need to be mindful of the fact that right now the competition can come from anywhere. So it's no longer that, okay, these are our direct competitors and this is the sector that we belong to. The advent of technology has blurred those lines between competitor or competing sectors and organizations. I mean, 15 years ago, who was to know that a simple iPod device would actually completely destroy the music industry, for example. And you have this technology firm coming up with a device and they're totally unrelated. And there's so many other examples, Airbnb and Uber, etc.
Exactly.
So that entire collaboration is also looking at how is the competition and who are we actually competing with, and how is it affecting our bottom line at the end of the day and cost control.
True.
So just wanted to.
Well,
and the report gives an example of, for example, the launch of the Sony MP3 player
and iPod
versus the iPod. And obviously Sony, we know, is a very orthodox organization. It's a very long-standing brand name and has a very Japanese culture. And Apple, we know, is a very modern brand. And what the research, the example they gave was Apple was able to launch its iPod within 8 months because of the collaborative culture within Apple. So that's an illustration of how you can achieve a competitive advantage, not through innovation. Innovation is one part, but also through collaboration and sharing. So I suppose that's the takeaway from this particular discussion. I'm just going to move on, Ms. Wen. You can add to that as well, because the next part is the one that you particularly enjoyed in the report, was around, they're saying, well, one of the ways the report suggests for leadership in the 21st century, one of the attributes or one of the characteristics is through the study of brain science. So I was quite amazed when I read this section, because it assumes that, for those of you who are not believers in Darwinism, but it assumes that the human brain has developed from the dinosaur age and from the reptilian age, and as we've advanced, we've become executive brains have taken over. But somewhere deep in our sort of brain cells is this reptilian characteristic. I like to call it the lizard characteristic. And it says that in the VUCA world, because there's so much uncertainty, we're constantly triggering our lizard brain, our reptilian brain. And therefore, when we trigger that part of our brain, we tend to be very reactive, we tend to either fight, or we tend to flight, or we tend to freeze, which when you encounter Helen, a chipkili, which is a gecko, a small lizard. That is precisely what the lizard does. So My next question to everybody here, and I'll start off with Misbah and I'll move across, because Misbah was quite excited by this part of the research, and he's been through an executive coaching very recently. And therefore, do you think that in Pakistan, because we are facing so many external, if you like, interventions and threats and complexities, do you agree that we need to manage our reactive nature and maybe a way of executive coaching helping us to understand our reptilian or lizard reactions is a way for leaders to gain some advantage?
No, absolutely, and you can see I'm quite thrilled to participate in this part of it. It came to me a year back, mindfulness was nice, buzzword that you have when you're in a conference, or in a workshop, outside office in a nice location, and, you're doing a little bit of yoga, and, it just had the value to that extent that you feel great coming out of that experience. But I never thought, it had any relevance in the workplace for me, and it came almost a year back when it is, a part of my development. We had a coach in Dubai who was working with me for a year, and we paid a lot of money to her. So I thought, I was going to get some very interesting business insights and how to be the next level leader and etc. And our session started with, okay, close your eyes and just relax. I'm like, are we paying her for this? What's going on? And really, it was such a big, aha moment, so to say, for me. It is absolutely critical for you to be conscious that you can get into a fight or flight mode, irrespective if you've been hugely successful in life or you are an amazing, manager. You have to become conscious of this particular thing, and I would urge everyone to go and start from, I think, page 17. At least read that page and be mindful of and be conscious that you can fail by when that fight or flight mode is triggered into you. And then it has, as we heard, the long shadow of the leader. The result is that it has extremely bad implications, sometimes even long term, and on number of people and aspects when that happens. So to be conscious of that and the complexity that you talk about, to be conscious that that's going to trigger that particular mode into you is very critical for a leader to know, to realize, so that they can see and recognize themselves in that situation and save. If they can't excel, to at least to start with, to at least save the situation, to understand, okay, you need to take a break, you need to breathe, you need to relax, and then come in.
And then in the UK, Mr. mentioned mindfulness, as a mechanism, as a training. I read in a report that there's now a UK parliamentary group dedicated to mindfulness, and they've come out with a report. Why do you suppose this is gathering, such intense sort of attention for leaders and individuals?
I think it's underpinned by the need for health and well-being of the individual and of the business. There's no doubt that the pressure that you put yourself under, and therefore if you're in a leadership position in the organisation, can have perverse consequences. So it's trying to, I think what we're trying to always achieve is that energy, positive energy, that drives an organisation forward. So you don't want everybody to be so relaxed they're going on the sun lounger for the majority of the day. But you want the energy, but a healthy energy, that is where your mind isn't overcrowded, where you're not focusing on the wrong things, and where you're not reacting. And I think worst of all, actually freezing. I can see that in people quite frequently, where the freeze mode is the one that's gone into, because there is so much going on that nothing happens, that there's no reaction. So I think in the UK and elsewhere, and it's a bit ironic actually, being here in Pakistan, where the ACCA Pakistan has been working tremendously hard and long hours all week for these events, so I feel a little bit guilty saying this, but I do see well-being as an absolutely critical score that we look at in our employee engagement for the organisation. And when we see a dip in well-being, it's quite often related, it's not about the actual illnesses that people are having, it's the pressure that they're feeling are under, the conflicting priorities, the lack of clarity within the organisation. There's just too much going on. So providing that space for people to be healthy and then productive is more and more important.
Fatma, would you tend to agree with when the report talks about managing your reactive brains and because of all the stress and the pressures of work?
Absolutely. I think the more information you have and then you have to react immediately, we don't have enough time to reflect and think and take a pause. And that pause is very important in life, whether it's in your personal or your professional life, and to just assimilate and then take a decision. So the pace of change is also impacting the way our brains are working overtime, quite frankly speaking. And Helen raises a very good point in terms of wellness and health of your employees, of your people as well, which is something which psychologists are looking at now, that the stress levels have gone up so much that you inherently collapse and it's not sustainable. And obviously over a long period of time it affects the organization. The reason why people tend to step back is that when you are overcrowded with a lot of information and then you have volatility and unpredictability in the situation around you as a business, as an individual, there's just too much to take at times. So we need to redesign the way we function as organizations as well, and there are already leading organizations out there who have transformed the work environment and the culture. So the future of work is a conversation that is very closely linked to the VUCA world as well, whether it's flexible hours, whether it's working from home, whether it's quite frankly working from anywhere in order to get that job done, which also gives individuals the space to manage their work-life balance more effectively.
Ms. Ransab, Vadim, fight, flight, freeze, would you agree with this sort of report emphasis on managing, and reflecting and managing your reptilian brain?
I think it's human reaction analysis. They've given it a name. Yeah. Okay. And we all have it. Okay. I think it has been, we make it worse if you link it to the earlier part of the report where the technological availability of information has basically inundated us with information and data points to which we have to react. When we let that control how we operate, we react in a human manner in which they have labeled it as that. The important, I think, part there is that conscious effort is required to break that vicious cycle. Okay. As an organization and as leaders of that organization, the leadership has to be conscious that that effort needs to be made so that people have flexible hours, as Fatma was saying, or they have personal time. Okay. They have time to reflect. They have time to process the information. The leadership needs the time to process the information and to react to the information in a rational manner. So a technique of that has been articulated in the report. I'm sure there are other techniques available, but the root cause is there. We are letting the work take over our lives. That must be controlled.
Yes. So I'm going to just quickly move on because I've been given a reminder from my team members. One of the questions that's coming in online, and do let me know which of you would like to answer this, is that a lot of our employees, obviously, and those online work in SMEs. So it's a very relevant question because they're asking leader interaction with employees in SMEs is next to zero. So what can we do to change this? So these are some of our members working in SMEs, very small organizations. So how would they sort of adopt the things that we've been talking about within SMEs? Who'd like to answer that?
If I may.
Please.
Okay. In regards to the things that we have been discussing, majority of those things would be relevant to an SME. Okay. they would need to collaborate within their organization. Being a smaller organization, I assume that comes naturally. Okay, the working environment does facilitate that. They need to, whoever is leading that organization, they need to be mindful of the competitive environment in which they operate. So the principles remain applicable. Okay, that is the beauty of a principle. It remains applicable at different scenarios. Its criticality and the way it is absorbed and reacted to would require specific approaches. Okay. And I believe what we have discussed here is that the scale of a business, okay, will have an impact in terms of the effort that needs to be put in to absorb certain strategies.
Helen.
Yeah, as I think the panel's been saying, we see collaboration as actually happening more easily in SMEs and those aspects. So, but maybe what the question is referring to is the opportunity for leadership exposure and new experiences. And one recommendation very much is those who are professionals should be making the use of their professional network. So looking outside the business when you're an SME as a member of ACCA or a member of any professional association, there are lots of leadership opportunities and opportunities for exposure in different environments outside the workplace that will then enhance your performance in the business or your career moving into medium and larger sized businesses. So I do think taking advantage of those broader opportunities is really important.
I think the question there maybe is asking the question, well, probably leaders in SMEs are constantly in a reptilian state of mind, so what can we do? And I think I've got to pick this up with the Chambers of Commerce, because I think we have an MOU with the Chambers of Commerce, so this may be a good area to interact with them on. So I'm going to quickly move on. There's a question here around the trade-off between empowerment, so they feel, okay, well, collaboration and sharing also means that we're empowering people, but is there a trade-off between empowerment and accountability? And how do leaders manage the trade-off between empowerment and accountability?
Not at all. I think it is driven by the culture of the organization as well. Empowerment is absolutely essential if you want your leaders to grow and the next levels of leaders to grow as well. But in order for the organization to ensure sustainability of good performance and high performance, accountability has to be part and parcel of that model. And they are both interlinked. With organizations are very focused and ensuring that there is, as you also highlighted, that a good idea or a change of how you do business can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to be the CEO or the CFO sitting there coming up with those ideas and process or system or whatever change that may be. And that in order to ensure that that idea reaches the business case desk and also is transformed into something which impacts business, is actually where empowerment starts. But then making that individual responsible and accountable for those decisions is absolutely key.
Yeah. Helen?
I think that this also comes down to performance management systems concentrating on behaviours as much as outputs and tasks. And what you're looking for from leaders is that you have demonstrated empowerment that has delivered results. So looking at the behaviours of your leadership and holding them accountable for those as much as the outputs and the traditional business metrics is really important in creating the culture that will enable empowerment to flourish.
So the last point from you.
Yeah, I think, in that it's very important, and I think this is where you become, because being a leader is about managing paradoxes, right? And in terms of accountability versus, a collaboration, there is a trade-off. And as a leader, you have to see, yes, I may lose my individual departmental objective here, but the organization and our customers and the society and the value we are creating is much bigger. And to be able to recognize that and to be able to weigh it is a critical component of leadership, right? So yes, if you just follow accountability, you're going towards silos. So when coming out of silo means taking on and being able to say that yes, I will lose something in this, but overall we will gain, and overall we are going to be better off. And that is, I think, that realization is very important.
Great. So I'll take two questions from the audience because we're running out of time. We've got a young man at the back there with his hand up. I don't know who's in charge of the roaming microphone. Anybody else with a question? We'll get the microphone to the young man at the back. Meanwhile, put your hand up if you would like to ask a question. And we've got our friends from Arthur Lawrence would like to ask a question. Very quickly, जल्दी से अपना सवाल पूछें. No.
Yeah, I'm an ACCA affiliate and I have a basic question for the C-suite leadership.
जरा ऊंचा बोले.
Do you think that focusing on startup incubation within the multinational companies is a way forward to actually think outside the box and present a new perspective on the conventional R&D of the organization, and with mentoring and support of the C-suite, ultimately leading to new product development strategies that are not comprehended by the companies? Like Ms. Fatma said that iPod was not considered to destroy the music industry and Airbnb was not considered to destroy the airplane industry. Do you think that new perspective from a whole different group of people who are not exposed to the multinationals but have the potential to give their input, do you think that the mentoring and the leadership of C-suite and incubation of these startups within the multinationals is a way forward to challenge the R&D that is currently being operated within the multinationals? Thank you.
But if you picked up on the question better than me, would anybody like to take that question, Rizwan?
I would endorse the opinion, not in terms of challenging the R&D, the last part, but complementing it. Okay? The fresh ideas in regards to the products that companies can take to market to serve the need of the customer at the end of the day, but better way for it to be than it to be coming from the customers themselves. So yes, there should be higher degree of engagement, and I have seen instances whereby very interesting and out of the box ideas have been presented. I do believe that there is a need for the right level of mentoring, because the asset that the startups have is the idea. Okay, the large companies understand how to productize it, how to effectively take it to market. There is value of the R&D which the company does itself. The startups won't replace it, in my personal opinion, but a higher degree of engagement is required in our market. Okay. We are seeing a large number of startups. We keep reading about it in the news. There is a need for greater engagement.
Yes, absolutely. One needs to encourage that in ensuring that it's connected with what the customer wants as well, and that is constantly changing, just like the environment. But one thing I'd like to say, and again, my opinion, when we talk about out of the box, I think there is no box now. Unfortunately, in this VUCA world, because there's been a merger, and not a merger, but an overlap of different industries and sectors and products, there is no such thing as the box. So you're just thinking and being creative, and that is why startups and entrepreneurial ventures are so critical, especially in a country like Pakistan. You have almost 200 million people. You have 60% under the age of 30. I mean, we have to create jobs, opportunities, and a good idea can come from anywhere. And the ecosystem has to work towards ensuring that we are allowing these ideas not only to be generated, but allowing them to have the infrastructure to go to market.
And there was no box to begin with, the earth has always been round.
I guess so. It was
So,
all.
can we have the next question?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'm Hassan Qadri from Sorry. We are working in consultancy since last 5 to 6 years, and you see with the CPAC thing, I would like to add on that point the competitor issue, and especially meeting the people other than accountants. Like once we are having consultancy business, we have projects where we have to collaborate with other professionals like engineers and other professionals or designers and other professionals, you know. What do you think? Do we need to, you know, once we go to the networking, do we need to tap on the opportunities? So we, you know, develop a networking session or some sort of a scenario where we can meet other professionals. Because you see, being in FCCA since last 10 years, being the member of the association, I've seen that you cannot go about being a conventional accountant because it's not so easier anymore to be a stereotypical accountant, because nowadays it calls for probably to be more of a strategic partner for businesses rather than being an accountant.
But I get a grip on your question. In other words, what you're saying is that we tend to collaborate with individuals who are like us. So professionals, accountants tend to collaborate with other professional accountants. So the question was, how can we go beyond that? You know, what do we need to do in order to collaborate with other professionals, engineers, lawyers, etc., within the teams? Would anybody like to pick up on that? Because I think you mentioned something in your points around collaboration beyond your...
Yes, especially in smaller companies, external collaboration becomes very important, because chances are that expertise, maybe even knowledge within your company, because of the smaller size, will not be adequate to be able to be a viable competitor in this world. So, excuse me, the avenues that are probably open to you would be, one would be of course personal connections, then it would be your own profession, and then expanding into other forums that have been mentioned. For example, if you need to collaborate with engineers, I can probably not give you an answer today, but my idea would be that if I needed that kind of thing, I would find engineering forums, find universities, find the academia, and find out who is the best source for the information or the network, specific network that you're looking for. These days, one of the biggest challenges for companies of any size is where to find the information that are needed to be able to take a decision. And this is a challenge which can't be underestimated, and in your case, perhaps as a small company, it becomes a bigger challenge when you're looking for specific areas where you yourself don't have expertise and perhaps don't have connections.
Helen, you wanted to add something?
Just quickly, I think talking about the C-suite, you should be expecting to hardly ever be collaborating with people who have the same professional, same skill set or same background as yourself. I think the skill is in either recruiting or identifying those who complement what you have and can bring something more to you, and actually quite often making sure that they are better than you at many things, and the skill is in embracing all of that, managing it and getting value out of it. But I think being able to communicate and collaborate across skill sets and professions is absolutely key to C-suite success.
Actually, already happening. To add to that is that you go back to your academic institutions and the education ecosystem as well. Maybe it's not here in Pakistan yet, but for example, Finland, where they are thinking of doing away with subjects and having a more collaborative approach or project-based approach in terms of studying traditional subjects. It's an interesting concept, and it's a matter of time where it takes speed and it goes out to the rest of the world. So you go back to how the academic institutions are defining their system, and that comes into their work. But again, that's 10, 15 years perhaps.
Certainly a lot of reforms needed. So I'm going to end it here. So what I'm going to do is, the other thing I wanted to add is that, ACCA yesterday signed a day before yesterday signed an MOU with the Pakistan-China Institute. So we're also making efforts in order to diversify your networks, and we're hoping that through the MOUs that we sign with other organizations, that you get exposure to other professions and other a diversity of people. We've also got a number of MOUs with chambers of commerce as well. So, and we do a lot of events with them where you will meet businessmen from all walks of life. So that's a way for members here to diversify their interaction. I'm going to end here. I do apologize for not taking any more questions, but we are running out of time.